Hey everyone, my name is Rich, and this is Rich Talks Records, episode number 50, and today we are going to be talking about the remarkable masterpiece, Nico's third album, 1970's Desertshore. But before we get into all of that, we're going to pull the camera way back. Now, so first of all, it is a year later. So I had said that I would do another Nico video, and that I would do one every winter. And the last several days out here, the sidewalks and driveway, everything has just been nothing but a sheet of ice. So I feel that the sheet of ice and the barren snow landscape is perfect for jumping back into Nico. So here we are, and I'm thrilled to be talking about this album. So now, there was a whole long section that I had cut out of my Marble Index review, and that I want to revisit today. So what I focused on, really what I did was, it was kind of a story in two parts, and I had jumped ahead to the second part. So you'll notice in that video, it's a little weirdly edited. Because I really try to avoid doing reshoots. I think that's kind of a drag. So it sort of jumps ahead to when I discovered the Bataclan bootleg, back when it was still a bootleg, and my amazement at hearing Janitor of Lunacy, the first song on this incredible album. Now, there was the whole history with Nico that I had before that. And the video was already long enough. I thought that spending that much time on the earlier part of my understanding of Nico was a terrible way to start the video, and that I should jump ahead to my discovery of her as a major talent in her own right. So I thought that made a lot more sense, and I am glad that I made that decision. However, I think that I want to bring back the first part of that story, because I dare say I have figured out how to tie it into one of the things that this video is going to be about. Now, if you want album talk, you're going to want to jump ahead a bit, because we're going to go down a couple little rabbit holes, and then I'm going to talk about Nico's history leading up to this album, etc., etc. So album talk will be in a little bit. Right now, it's rabbit hole time, so jump with me, won't you? So anyway, so I got into the Velvet Underground, that would have been, I think, sophomore year of high school. For those keeping score, that would have been 92. And it was the Words and Music of Lou Reed compilation, for anyone who remembers that. It was a Columbia House purchase on cassette. And a lot of it was from the first album, and it was revelatory in ways that few other music listening experiences can be, including hearing Nico for the first time. I loved Nico's voice immediately. I had known who she was because of the first time I ever heard of her or saw her was during my Brian Jones obsession. There was a book of photographs of the Rolling Stones done by Dezo Hoffman. And so that was the first, and so there was a picture of Nico at a party with Andrew Loog Oldham. So that was the first time that I ever saw a photo of her. And I think they mentioned Andy Warhol, or that, and that Brian was friends with Andy Warhol. Like, there was, I forget, I mean, it was just sort of short little captions. It was a picture book, not a book. So that was the first time I ever heard of her. Jump forward, there was the scene in the Doors movie that I didn't really know how to make heads or tails of. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I was a big Oliver Stone fan. I loved Oliver Stone. And I was not really into the Doors movie. I'll be honest with you, I was kind of bummed out by the Doors movie. What was exciting to me And what was interesting to me, other than the records and the film footage of them, was John Densmore's book. I wasn't the movie, and it was kind of the first time I wasn't like that into something Oliver Stone had done, and I was I was just sort of bummed by it. So, but I didn't really know what to make out of that scene. I didn't really think about it particularly. So hearing Nico's voice, you know, Femme Fatale and I'll Be Your Mirror on that compilation, that was incredible. I mean, that really was revelatory, and the idea that that's what she looked like matched with that's what she sounded like, right? Then, you know, as I got further into high school, there's kind of all the salacious Nico stories, and, you know, if you want salacious tales, there's no shortage of them with her. And I didn't, as a young person, you know, 16, 17 years old, I'll be honest, I took a very, very dim view of junkies. I really didn't like that. So, you know, part of the reason I didn't go further into the germs for a long time was I just didn't want to know. And I had heard a couple Johnny Thunder songs. I liked them, but again, I just didn't want to know. I kind of willfully ignored people like that for a long time. And Nico, like I said, I mean, I remember there was a Velvet Underground, I guess, tribute act or some sort of performance art thing where they couldn't get a girl to cover the Nico parts. I didn't see this, but a friend told me about it, that they had gone to see it. And so what they did instead was they got a girl to wear a robe, you know, like a monk's robe, and ride across the stage on a bicycle and fall over, right? And that was sort of how Nico, unfortunately, and kind of like Johnny Thunders, Nico was sort of, because there was so much documentation of the final years and of the falling apart was very, very well documented, that it really kind of shaped my perception of her in those early years. And, you know, and this is the part I did touch upon in the last video, I did sort of think of her then as being the mouthpiece for Kale. That Kale was a genius, and then she, you know, and none of that was helped by a purchase that I made. I thought, well, I'll check out her solo music. I'll just see what it's like. And I was at the long-lamented store I've talked about before, the Crow's Nest, which was this vast, endless, it was basically like an airport terminal. God, I love that place. A lot of attitude from the employees, but boy, it was worth it, because God, that place delivered the goods. And I still reflect upon stuff I saw there that I didn't have the money to buy, that I could kick myself because I truly never saw again. So, but this, you know, I mean, they were gone by, I don't know, maybe the middle 2000s, but this is back in the 90s. Anyway, so summer of 1995, 17 years old, I purchased this Nico Chelsea Girl Live. So this is from a live show, a whole show, I guess, from 1985. Where is it actually recorded? Chelsea Town Hall. So I'm assuming that is in England, using my incredible powers of geographical understanding. This was put out on Cleopatra. At the time, Cleopatra didn't have the greatest rep. They were sort of a little bit of a bargain bin label. And so if something was on Cleopatra, there was kind of it's on Cleopatra. Kind of in the same way that, you know, Rhino used to be a little bit of it's on Rhino. How good is it really? So that was my opinion back then, right? So I listened to this one time, and I quite categorically did not like it. I was just, again, really bummed out by it. And I just thought, well, if this is indicative of what her music was, then this is just weird. People who like this is just weird death cult stuff. And like drug addict stuff, like sort of worshiping the whole like sort of beautiful losers thing. And I'm just not interested in it. And I think that, I think part of the reason I had sensitivities around that were simply for the fact that I had a lot of problems with depression. That's been a lifelong thing, but it's particularly, elevated when you're a teenager. And I think I just had fought against my own darkness too much to open up certain doors. Like, I could handle a certain amount of darkness and I could handle a certain amount of staring into the void, but at some point I would snap out and pull back. And stuff like Nico, and even like certain goth stuff, just seemed to me, it took me a little while to get into Joy Division. I still, as of 1995, I wouldn't have been into Joy Division, for instance. But the whole thing was, at the time, Nico, especially latter-day Nico, was something of... I say all this to sort of point out that latter-day Nico was something of a kitsch figure. And, great in the Velvet Underground, and then it sort of goes to hell. When her solo albums started being kind of critically rediscovered and the Marble Index started getting written about as a masterpiece, I think that one of the things that unfortunately happened with Nico, because the Marble Index, and this point was very much reinforced by the research I did for this video, the Marble Index was praised to the sky for being one of the great downer albums, proto-goth. It's so depressing. It's suicide music. Or I'm sorry, unaliving music. Boy, society's a lot better with that one, huh? That just fixes it all right up there. So, I think that in a weird way, I'm going to make kind of a parallel. In the 90s, you had Riot Girl, right? And you had feral self-expression. Very intense, very raw, no production, Xerox graphics, all of that, right? And the PJ Harveys and the Bjorks of the world were not a part of that. And I never actually saw where she said it, but apparently Kathleen Hanna famously slated PJ Harvey. Right? And they were sort of, weirdly, they were sort of not considered in the mix of like important female voices, which was odd. Because these were major serious artists doing major serious work and actually getting across culturally. And the idea that, you would bring them up in certain circles and it was waved away, was always very curious to me. And that I felt that, sort of through no fault of their own, because those bands and Bikini Kill and Heavens to Betsy, that was very real stuff. I mean, that wasn't BS stuff, right? And they were living those lives, and the art and the aesthetics are a kind of a direct, like, one-to-one reflection, right? So there's not any cosplay going on there. So I want to be very clear about that. I am not putting the bands down. I'm putting the perception around it. I understand why those bands would have done media blackouts. Like, I completely get why they would have gotten more reactionary. Like, I understand it, because they were getting it from all angles. So I am not putting them down at all. I want to be clear about that. But the perception was, weirdly, though they were sort of arguing for equal expression, or to be taken seriously, to not be minimized, all of the among other things, that they were weirdly ghettoized and fetishized for their feralness and rawness, and the PJ Harveys and the Bjorks of the world did not have that cachet. And it's an odd thing. In a similar way, the perception of Nico moving away from the kitsch figure to the goth ice queen whatever weirdly also ghettoizes her. And the Marble Index is the you know, it's very like it's like exploitation stuff that, oh, check out this album, you'll want to kill yourself, right? It's and again, kind of, and I talked about Salo in the last, kind of in the same way that Salo used to be this very sensationalized, titillating. Salo is one of the is a masterpiece in part because it's such a, you know, to use the Rene Bricard line that I've referenced before, you are looking at Van Gogh's ear when you watch Salo. That is not titillating. It is the scream. It is the scream against fascism. I mean, it is unendurable pain. It's the worst of the worst, like just shoved at you, and it's not titillating, you know, and it's not sensational. It's fucking dark. It's the most dark. It's so dark, it's weirdly light. Like, and that's the surfaces of Salo. It's not a particularly dark movie. It's all these empty white marble fucking hallways, you know. And Nico's Marble Index is a similar thing. The Marble Index could be those hallways. It's the reason I connect these things. But again, Evenings of Light, Lawns of Dawns, like it's almost not even a night album in the sense of impenetrable darkness. It's like 4 a.m. in Iceland with the sun out. Because there is that sense of dislocation, right? So I think the read that when Nico started to be reevaluated, I think was fundamentally wrong. And also in the same way, like that you saw with like the Coven critics who I tend to rail on about. You know, there's a lot. They had a lot to say about like the first Raincoats album. Nothing to say about, very little to say about Oddie Shaper Moving. You know, I find that very peculiar. You know, there's a lot to say about the early Slits, virtually nothing to say about the return of the giant Slits, right? And I think that sort of ghettoization, I don't think that is very helpful. In fact, I think it's wildly counterproductive because it sort of freezes those artists in amber, or even X-Ray Specs going into Polystyrene's solo album. Like the growth and development is as rewarding as the initial statement or the initial finding or seizing upon a voice or creative devices, etc., right? So that is the phenomenon that leads us to the Desert Shore. I always say the Desert Shore. I realize it is just Desert Shore. Sorry, it's the way the world is, okay? So this is a lot of people tend to, it's great, but it's not as good as. And I actually really disagree with that. I think that this is an equal masterpiece. And I think that this shows growth and development and on a number of fronts. And I think that the idea that because it doesn't have this sort of weird titillating thing of, you know, and then the same thing happened with Syd Barrett. Like, he's this crazy guy making these crazy records. You know, and then you listen to Dark Globe, or you listen to, any number of songs, Late Night. And again, you're looking at Van Gogh's ear. It isn't, this guy took a lot of acid and now he's crazy. Like, it's really belittling in a slightly different context. It's, and maybe that's the ghettoizing of a mentally ill artist. I don't know. But I really, one of the reasons I want to I get into this is because, you know, my perceptions of Nico were atomized by the experience of hearing Janitor of Ludacy on that Bataclan bootleg in my second girlfriend's apartment, right? In that day, in that moment, it really was atomized, you know, and all the sort of the kitsch stuff or the salacious stuff, all of that really went out the window. And I think I saw Nico Icon maybe like the year after that, maybe, I don't remember, but I feel like that just further hammered home the point, right? So anyway, I say all that to sort of get that out of the way, and it would also be really funny if I cut this out yet again, ha ha ha, but I don't really want to. So anyway, so we left off with Nico putting out the Marble Index, and in 1969, so that was towards, I guess, the end of 68. 69, she moves to London. So supposedly, when she arrived in London, she performed some solo concerts. I have not found, if you know of any, let me know. I found no record of her performing in 1969. So if there's something out there and I somehow missed it, I looked, I didn't see anything. Let me know, because I would be very interested. In early 1970, or March of 1970, she did a really interesting interview with Richard Williams of the Melody Maker. And I guess when Nico arrived in London, according to this article, she reached out to both Keith Richards and Anita Pallenberg, who I guess she got on with, as well as Paul McCartney. And apparently Paul, you know, with Linda at this point, I guess she also had a history, a positive history with Linda as well. So interesting. So she reached out to both Keith and Paul to help her in making a new album and potentially producing it, providing, doing sort of, what Cale did, you know, helping to sort of midwife arrangements, et cetera, et cetera. But both Keith and Paul were just unable to help her. Think about the Keith Richards of 1969. You can think about the Paul McCartney of 1969. These were very busy men. So they were just unable to help her. And she also had problems securing a record contract. Her leaving of Elektra, kind of like a lot of things in Nico's life, is open to interpretation. Was she actually dropped? Jack Holtzman and Nico seem to disagree on that. Jack Holtzman doesn't actually remember her being dropped. The album hadn't sold, but Elektra also was in the business of letting artists grow. So, but this also, I don't know, maybe, and I'm just realizing now, maybe the reason why Jack Holtzman doesn't remember Nico being dropped is that would have been around the time of the Elektra sale that I talked about in the Tim Buckley video. So maybe Nico was just simply a sort of a victim of the changing hands, and so who knows? I'm speculating here, but maybe some accountant looked and said, "Oh, this person's put out one album and it sold 10,000 records. Why would we keep her? Why would we subsidize another album for this person?" Maybe that's what it was. Maybe that actually kind of makes sense. In 1970, she performed a show, I guess with very little notice, with her on harmonium and John Cale on viola at the Roundhouse in London. I have only been able to find one song from this performance. It is amazing, and I will link that below. It is absolutely incredible. So one final piece of about Nico in 1969. And it's funny because I referenced it a lot in the last video, but here it is. This is the Frozen Warnings compilation that has all the really, really great supplementary material. That is fantastic. So I referenced this a lot, and for some reason never showed it in the video, so there you have it. So the supplementary, the material, the bonus tracks for the Desertshore disc has the demos. Now, I will just say, what is purported to be the demos for the Marble Index that you'll sometimes see that route from the Frozen Warning compilation, those are actually just alternate studio takes. These demos were, I think, actual demos, I really want to say. I have seen it sort of purported that this is actually the first version of Desertshore. The Desertshore is essentially an album that was recorded twice. But there doesn't really, I'll be honest, it doesn't really seem to be a ton of truth to that. And this does feel more like demos. It comes across as demos, I think. In terms of final presentation, not in terms of preparedness with the material or intensity of the performances or commitment to what she is expressing. But I just don't know that, I just don't sort of buy the idea that the album was, in effect, that this is a scrapped version of the first album. I just don't know about that. Kind of like Tim Buckley with the making of Happy Sad. Sometimes people, especially back then, would just go into the studio and record. It was not unknown to go and do that. So if you somehow know that this, if I'm wrong, that this in fact was a fully, that this was intended to be the third album, let me know. But I just don't buy that. And I think it's kind of like the idea that this is a trilogy with the Marble Index in the end. I think that's just kind of people gilding the lily decades after the fact. But on August 20th, 1969, Nico recorded My Only Child, Janitor of Lunacy, Abshide, an early version of Afraid called You Are Beautiful, The Falconer, and All That Is My Own, named here on the Desertshore. These performances are universally excellent. They're really, really powerful. I love them. They are worth hearing. That's all up on YouTube, so you can go check it out easily. As I said in the last video, it's at your fingertips. That being said, I think that kind of like with the Marble Index outtakes, this is the right call. Yeah, this is, these demos, they're really powerful. Also, as I said in the last video, Nico with the harmonium is the totality of the music. It is like Bob Dylan. She's the band. And in some ways, this is all you need to hear. On the other hand, it's that much more powerful when we get to the quote-unquote real album sessions. So that's kind of up to you as to what you would prefer. I think these are great, but this is, to me, purely supplementary material to the main album, as opposed to there were decisions that maybe could have been different or something like that. And I think that I've now long established that if I think there's a great B-side or a great alternate or a great set of outtakes or something that I think are essential, I make a big to-do about that. So I try to separate the wheat from the chaff in that sense. But they are certainly worth hearing. And if you like this album, and if you like Nico, and you want to hear the pure distilled essence of Nico, go check those out. They're absolutely worth it. But I'm not going to get too deep into it. On those recordings, though, she references this is a song for the movie. And she had started making films with, and had started a relationship with French, sort of the second wave of the new wave. He was post Godard and Truffaut, Philippe Garrel. So, as noted, these are stills from from scenes that she made from a movie that she made with Philippe Garrel. Apparently they were together for 10 years, and apparently they were, We're now well into this part of Nico's life. You know, they were junkies together. So she lived with him in Italy initially, and then they found their way to France. And the film that they made, started making, I guess, in 1969, but completed in 1970 is, and I'm not going to do the French pronunciation. It is, I wouldn't even know how. It is, I'll just say it in English. It is The Inner Scar. Now, I attempted to locate a copy of The Inner Scar. I was going to buy it on DVD, and the delivery times were just really, really, really slow. And I didn't want to delay this video any more than it was already delayed. However, there is a pretty decent version of The Inner Scar on the Internet Archive, so I'm going to be linking to it. I'm going to be talking about the film in conjunction with the album quite a lot. So, they make The Inner Scar, and then the album is completed. It appears that the completion of the album, the final versions are used in the film. It's not demos, but it looks like the completion of the full album might post-date the recording of the album, because the Desertshore didn't get released until the very, very end of 1970. December 20th of 1970 is when it actually finally came out. So, right towards the end of the year. Nico had this to say about The Inner Scar. This new one is very important to me. It is so powerful. We did part of it in the American desert and part of it in the Egyptian desert. I don't know when we'll finish it. It doesn't matter. There's no hurry, because it's a very timeless thing. And in fact, it is. What is interesting is when they went to go film it in America, she apparently contacted Mohawk Fraser and urged Mohawk Fraser. So isn't that also interesting? She was on good terms with Mohawk Fraser. How about that? And apparently her pitch to Mohawk Fraser to come out to the desert with her was that there was going to be a lot of heroin there. They were gonna get to do a lot of heroin, and Mohawk Fraser turned down that request. At some point, Nico finds herself. She's back working with Cale. They have done the show. They do the show at the Roundhouse, and somehow, and I'm not really sure how, but somewhere in there, Cale is in contact and brings in Joe Boyd. Now, Joe Boyd did a lot of great work. He did one of my favorite REM albums, Fables of the Reconstruction. But Joe Boyd's is probably most well known and most celebrated, justly and rightly, deservedly, for his impeccable work on a couple of the greatest albums ever made. This is my personal favorite, Brighter Later, from 1970 by Nick Drake. One of the great albums of all time. Will I ever make Nick Drake videos? I don't know. I feel like, let me tell you, when I got into Nick Drake, also via second ex-girlfriend, and it was actually an ex-boyfriend of hers who got her into Nick Drake. When I got into Nick Drake, there was no information about this guy. This was part of a box set with all of his albums, and it was a special order that I had to put in at a record store. So nobody knew anything about this guy, and other than he had committed suicide. So it's kind of funny because now Nick Drake, I feel like, is one of the most documented and talked about people ever. That has completely exploded over the years, and I've watched that transition take place. It's pretty funny. So that's what Joe Boyd is primarily known for. But this, I guess, predates the Brighter Later sessions. I think those came just after. So anyway, so they worked at Sound Techniques Limited in London. The loan, and I'm assuming maybe this was done for the movie specifically, I don't know, but the lone exception was La Petite Chevalier, recorded in Paris. So I had quoted Mohawk Fraser in the last video about what it was like working with Nico or being around Nico, I will now quote Joe Boyd. Being around Nico was kind of depressing. She was a very tortured character. I mean, you can see the romance of Warhol, the Factory, and the Velvets, but when you get up close to it, you think, Jesus, this is pretty gloomy, boring stuff. So I think I think Joe Boyd, being a reasonable human being, I think that's probably a fair assessment. I don't know that I would have wanted to hang out around it, I can tell you that. And finally, there's Cale's role in all of this. So Cale, again, kind of like the last album, sort of one-man bands it. He plays all the instruments except for the trumpet and except for two instances of vocals, which we will be touching on, backing vocals, which we'll be touching on. And Cale's role is so interesting because by this point he had produced this first Stooges album, and he was now embarking upon his own solo career. So it's very interesting because in 1970 you have the Velvet Underground making Loaded, you have Nico doing this and being kind of a figure around London, and then making this movie. But you also have Cale, who put out Vintage Violence, and Vintage Violence is a remarkable set of songs. But Cale at this time, with his ties to the avant-garde, his sort of image as being something of a sonic avatar and visionary, what is he at this point? What is John Cale in 1970? Well, what he is, he's the analog Brian Eno. And really, if you kind of look at it, Brian Eno, the early years of Brian Eno were really just sort of making moves from the John Cale playbook, really. This idea that, because if you look at, you would expect Cale, as an emerging solo artist, to make music that was far, far more avant than what the Velvets were doing on the third album or on Loaded, certainly. And yet, what is he? And just like with Eno, you would think that, Eno was being confined by Brian Ferry, and he's going to go. Isn't it interesting that both of them wind up making very clever, asymmetrical, brilliant pop recordings, and that they have a great ear for melody, obscure lyrics. There's a sense of humor to all of it. It's very, very interesting that Eno starts off his career almost in the exact same way that Cale does. It's just that the difference between the two was that Cale sort of had all the music theory stuff and could kind of back up what he was doing on more conventional terms, whereas I think Cale had more of the kind of intellectual theory stuff. And that was probably more of the playground that he ran around on. But it is interesting. Cale is such a strange role at this time because he's both avant and pop. And just like those early Brian Eno records, advancing the concept of pop and, again, pursuing it from odd abstract angles, and yet winds up with things that can be very conventionally beautiful. So that's Cale at this time. So Cale has really kind of discovered a whole other aspect of his talents, and that's the Cale that comes in to working on Desertshore, and all of that is, there's sort of the full expression of that. So I think that does a decent job of sort of setting up where Nico was at in 1970, and kind of some of my thoughts about all of it. So let us get into album talk finally. Yes. All right, so we're finally going to get into album talk after all of that. So, and as we get into that, if you have watched my first Nico video, I spent a little bit of time talking about the Evening Light promotional film with Iggy Pop is in, and I said something like, wouldn't it be cool if there was an entire movie, if that was an entire film, because it's a great piece of sort of experimental short film. I said, well, what if there was a feature length? Well, there is. The Inner Scar by Philippe Garrel. Depending on your kind of ability or interest in austere early 70s European art house cinema. The Inner Scar is a very remarkable piece of work. It's an even more minimalist version of one of my favorite movies of all time, Teorema. It is it is like the music itself of Nico. Vast, empty expanses. Nico plays. So this is a still from the film, and so that's Ari leading Nico on horseback. Very striking images of the circle of fire and the white sands with Nico on a horse, a black horse in the middle. It is an incredible film that I greatly enjoyed. I wasn't necessarily able to parse out all of the meanings of it, and I'm sure that there are things that were happening in it that I am unaware of. There's very little dialogue. I want to say Nico does one scene. I think the scene in the cave might be in French, I think. And then sort of at the climactic scene, or just before the climactic scene, Nico speaks in German sort of to the camera. So the version that is on the Internet Archive does not have subtitles. I'm unaware of what she was saying in those moments. And the Frenchman who is sailing with the bow and arrows, he speaks French, I guess. I don't. So, but again, I'm unaware of what he's saying. So there are things that I am not getting in the film. However, like the opening sequence, which I believe that is Philippe Garrel. So there are, is it 3 or 4 people in the film other than Nico? There's the opening scene. So I believe that is Philippe Garrel. Then Ari, but then there's so it is 4. So then there's like an infant with like longer curly hair, and then there's which I assume represents, I don't know, I don't want to say that. But then there's the guy who is clearly French, I guess, in the rest of the film, and is there at the end when he hands the sword up to Nico. So, and that's sort of the final shot. She's lit from below, and it's very impressive and dramatic. It's a beautifully shot film. It is visually stunning. But as a person, and I've talked about this before, who appreciates vast open spaces, it was filmed, I guess, I don't know, in the Arctic somewhere. It was filmed across a couple deserts, filmed in Egypt. Excuse me. It is a visually stunning film, and the one word I saw used to describe it, painterly, which I would certainly agree with. It's the minimalist version of Lawrence of Arabia, I suppose. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. Again, you might not have an appetite for that sort of thing, but if you do, if you like any kind of experimental film, it's absolutely fantastic, and a really, really, really interesting sort of development of the Nouvelle Vague. Apparently, they made other films together. I have not seen them. I watched a couple of Philippe Garrel's earlier shorter films, like one from the May '68 student riots in Paris. Yeah, really, really cool. But so they were together for a decade. So the reason I say all of that is because the film and the movie are in a lot of ways one and the same. And Nico, while not necessarily strictly, a year before John and Yoko did it, this in some ways is the first film album. Not strictly because not all the songs are in the film, but as a series of sort of vignettes and set pieces, a number of which are set to songs from this album. It does take on that feel long before anybody else was doing it. So I think that to really get into the headspace of the album, I think the film is really important. I wish I had seen the film earlier because it has sort of like, yep, that is the Desert Shore. That is the Inner Scar, the Desert Shore, to me are one and the same. And one other thing, I feel like I have made some critical comments about Lester Bangs here and there, and I see a lot of knocking of him now. I see a lot of very tatty things said about old Lester. And, you know, I have my critiques, my criticisms of him, but this is what he had to say after, or I guess he had heard an early version of the Desert Shore. This is about a month before the album came out. But he's talking about collaborations between Lou Reed, John Cale, and then her, and he's kind of analyzing their recent work. So, at any rate, he talks about these 3 different songs, but I think this is a remarkable piece of writing and a remarkable way of talking about Nico's work. There is a sense of arcane kingdoms crumbling, nations whose kings have gone mad or embarked on courses of tyranny and chaos, while citizens run through the streets eaten by their own madnesses. A sense of almost mystical guilt, like something out of Christian mythology or Bergman's The Seventh Seal, prevails, and themes of subjugation, punishment, and personal rackings rear in one form or another, all wrapped up in an opulent, jewel-like imagery whose facets only reflect infinite ambiguities. Lester, when you were good, you were good. So that leads us perfectly into the first song, Janitor of Lunacy, the song that really made me a fan and redefined my entire understanding of Nico. Janitor of Lunacy, I will say, is quite possibly her single most perfect song. It may very well be the single best song. Yeah, it may very well be the single best song that she's ever written. I just don't know that it gets better. I feel like this is the ultimate. So the other thing I want to say about this album is such an advancement on the Marble Index in a lot of ways, because it is more intuitively and organically an open musical and sensory experience than the Marble Index. Because the thing about the Marble Index is it has a great mathematical equation, which is Nico plus Cale, right? What is so amazing about this album is they are far, far more integrated, and there is not the sense of it being grafted together as much. That Nico is her own separate city-state. That essentially the Marble Index, the masterpiece that it is, and I am in no way criticizing it, but the Marble Index is essentially 2 images exposed over each other. You have Nico and you have Cale. This is far more integrated. This is much more than of an integrated painting of the 2 and their sensibilities. And I also think that Joe Boyd certainly helps in terms of the use of room ambience and whatever he was doing in terms of miking as a sound experience. This is an advancement beyond the Marble Index. So Janitor of Lunacy, like if you look on Wikipedia, it says that this is written about Brian Jones. I don't know that that's true, because in an interview, Nico said that this was a song written for the movie. And it is unbelievable. It was a favorite of Iggy Pop's. Iggy singled that one out when talking about Nico's songwriting genius. And as a melody, it is one of the great melodies that I've ever heard in my life. It's obviously a very simple melody, but it is perfect. It is penetrating. It is haunting. And then you have that vocal. Is this Nico's single greatest vocal performance? I don't know. It might be. What's interesting is it's always her greatest vocal performance. So the demo version, what we'll get into towards the end, where her Peel session, obviously the Bataclan performance, it's always great. It is her song. It's the national anthem of it's the national anthem of her soul and of her aesthetics. This is good. It just doesn't get much better. she hits those notes with ultimate power. I forget who said it, but they were talking about how she was sort of a limited harmonium player, but that would give her, the positive of that would give her voice room to fill up the rest of the space. I don't know that I would want Nico to be a virtuoso harmonium player. And speaking of Brian Jones, Charlie Watts one time said that Brian wasn't necessarily a great musician, but I like that he mastered an instrument a la a John Coltrane. But I see that a little bit differently because Brian came up with all of these incredible parts. And he could come up with really, really great music on all these different instruments that he was otherwise kind of just unfamiliar with. So to me, that is the mark of a great musician. And to me, Nico is a great harmonium player because this is indelible and powerful. It's I believe that this recording is just the voice and harmonium, and it is perfect. You don't need anything else. As I said before, she is the totality of the music. She is the band. So the lyrics, so you have like that melody, you have that voice, you have the harmonium playing, which is as big as could fill a canyon. And then you have the lyrics. It's one of the greatest sets of lyrics ever written. I don't know that lyrics get better than that. It's such a brilliant set of imagistic, tortured lyrics that, she's a songwriting Antonin Artaud. She is unbelievable. It's as good as lyrics get. And again, I just want to point out she hadn't been writing songs for that long, and so many other people. And I'm not saying this is I'm not saying this as a criticism, but like you hear that original Doors demo, and it's awkward, right? It doesn't sort of fully fit. Like that's the thing about Nico is there's weirdly not a learning period for her writing songs. She's just that good that early, and then it just develops from there. At least for a while, it did before the addictions and the lifestyle stuff got too much for her to handle, as it does for basically anybody who goes down that road. But this is her prime. And what an absolutely extraordinary white-hot work of genius Janitor of Lunacy is. That as a title is one of the best titles. Janitor of Lunacy. God damn it. That as a phrase, as a title. Who does better than that? Fuck. Janitor of Lunacy. Come on. I don't know what else to say. Other than you are in the grips of it when you hear it. It is an immersive experience. It just is masterful. This woman was a fucking genius, like truly. And I think that there's a certain thing. When I was talking about kitsch before. There's the Twin Peaks pilot where the Sarah Palmer character just keeps screaming after she hears that about the death of Laura Palmer. David Lynch talked about the original screening of that and how somebody started laughing and then a couple other people started laughing because it was so intense and so in your face. And David had such a great line about that where he said, and I'm not going to imitate him, though I certainly can be prone to be sometimes, but David just said this great thing where he's like, sometimes with something that intense and that real that doesn't let up, like a little bit of laughter squirts out, like because people don't know how to take it, And I think that's the thing. I think sometimes stuff where your interest level, where there is a little bit of kitsch or there is a little bit of flippancy, those I find a lot of times those are the people, or that's the work where there's actually a lot there, and it's actually only ever going to get deeper. And it's maybe something that you just haven't encountered yet, and your brain is just unfamiliar with, So I talked about that first live album with a sense of embarrassment and that period is not without its issues, but I think there was a level of I I think I needed to be smacked in the face by Janitor of Lunacy. I think I needed that. I think I needed that. I think I needed the cold water of that thrown across my face to make me realize, no, this woman is the goods. She's beyond the goods. This is songwriting at such a unbelievably high level of creativity and discipline. There's nothing awkward. There's no weird, awkward her trying to shoehorn lines in phonetically. There's nothing awkward. It's all clean and disciplined and perfect. It is a cathedral, you know. What a remarkable work of genius Janitor of Lunacy really is. God, I love it. I marvel at it. You know, I am moved by it and I marvel at it. I don't know what else to say. Then we go into an absolute fucking epic. Truly an epic. By the way, this is The Four Men. I got this in 2002. I didn't get this in 2002. This came out in 2002. I think I got this maybe in 03 or 04. I forget when I got this. But this is the Four Men with Beards issue of the album. It's on very, like, I guess it's 180 gram vinyl. Plays well. There's surprisingly... there's a little bit more surface noise than one would expect, but then again, I also have listened to this record a lot, and I listen to this album at very high volumes. Same thing I do with Marble Index. There's something about it. It demands to be played loudly. It demands to be played, you know, that you can not think about anything else other than the music. So we get into the second song, The Falconer. The Falconer. The Falconer is another. I mean, the Falconer is the Inner Scar, and it could also be the tale of the Frenchman. I'm just nominally calling him the Frenchman in the film, and his journey, and sung from his perspective. But the thing about the Falconer, and Cale does some great drone work, great treatment work on this, because you have the harmonium, but you have whatever else he's doing. I don't know if he's plucking piano strings. I don't know how he's getting that. I don't know how he's achieving those drones. But again, you have what Cale's doing in terms of the instrumentation, but then you have the immense ambient presence of the actual recording, the actual performance. So I have to, I guess, give credit to Joe Boyd on that, or somewhere between Boyd and Cale, because the Keith Richards line of capturing the room, you're capturing the room, and my God, do they fucking do it epically. Just absolutely phenomenal. And it's sort of ultimate darkness. Also, I talked about Nico's end phrasing on a lot of the songs on the Marble Index. Well, here, and especially this song, these are melismatic, middle of the phrase, melismatic flourishes that are absolutely incredible. What's interesting, too, though, is that I think that she might have done more of that in a prettier way on the Marble Index, whereas this is colder and sadder in a way. But again, another masterful set of lyrics. Who was writing like this disciplined and this focused, and so much in this sort of other world? Because, you know, even other people who were very serious writers and serious artists. I mean, like, if you think about David Bowie's The Man Who Sold the World, which I love and I think is an amazing album, there's still, like, She Shook Me Cold, is that the song? Like, there's still, like, sort of relatable, even if it's coming at it in kind of a weird angle, there's still sort of, like, relatability, or, like, love songs, or something, like, this is so in its own world. It's such an act of extreme artistic discipline. I admire the hell out of it. It's just such high level stuff. But then, so you sort of have this song that's kind of almost like the single bleakest thing she's ever done. It's sort of ultimate darkness. And then what happens? John Cale comes in with this beautiful light classical reverie on piano that at first, the first couple times I heard this record, I was like, what the fuck is that? Like, what is happening? Like, but no, it's perfect. It's perfect because it sort of leads into, because what you realize is that Nico has effectively written a triptych in song, kind of like Tim Buckley with Love from the Room at 109. I always forget the title of that. But you have this sort of the opening, and then it goes into this beautiful middle where the sun comes out and is blinding. And this amazing, beautiful middle section that eventually it recedes and returns back into the ominous darkness and depths. Does all of this in 5 minutes, 39 seconds. The Falconer is another incredible epic that almost that should be 10 minutes. It covers like 10, 15, 20 minutes of ground in 5.5 minutes. It's her very own day in the life, I suppose. Similar lengths. The Falconer, incredible. Then we get into a song that's in the film, where Ari goes off on his own. My Only Child. The other thing I will say, by the way, is while I sort of contend that they're not necessarily essential, the demo version, like the on here, the demo version of the The demo version of the Falconer is absolutely incredible. Just Nico and harmonium. You should listen to that as well. And also this version of My Only Child, the demo version of My Only Child, Nico and harmonium of that, unbelievable. But here, it is stripped all the way down except for these incredible elements. And that is, you have this very austere trumpet off to the side, sort of announcing it. The trumpet periodically comes back in. Nico sings beautiful, again, imagistic, hyper-poetic about her child. But boy, it reaches out into these really fascinating sort of theater of cruelty images. And then what happens? The most unexpected thing, like the unexpected middle portion of the Falconer, there's a chorus, a gorgeous, soaring choral chorus, 3-part harmony. Nico, John Cale, and Adam Miller. And they actually even sing it in a round. It's so sort of classically beautiful, but also unusually beautiful. It is incredible and completely unexpected, completely left field, and fits perfectly because it's an expansion. It's an expansion of the aesthetics of the Marble Index. They're taking it into new territories. They aren't, like in the castle. She's out in the desert. This is out in the world. This is by the ice caps, by the in the Arctic Circle, in the desert. It is going everywhere. Nico described her character in this film as a queen, and I was careful to differentiate not a fairy tale queen, an actual queen, and how she interacts with the world and these other characters in different scenes. And this is and also those harmonies. This starts getting into with the 3-part harmonies, but the way that it's recorded and the intensity with which it's sung and the amount of echo that's put on it. Between that and the intense drone work of the Falconer and the ambient style of recording of the harmonium on Janitor of Lunacy, this album is a sound experience as much as it's a song or lyric or voice experience. And it really does start to get into the phenomenon that I've talked about before with Public Image Limited and a few other instances, where it really does start getting into that sort of 12-tone harmonic thing where you're hearing more than the music. And as it fills the room, you start being affected by it psychologically. And again, this isn't, because this isn't the Marble Index, and it's not just, it's depressive or something. It's going into fascinating areas with it, and it's just that it's even that much more immersive. Side one ends then with the palette cleanser recorded in Paris. Nico on harmonium and her son Ari, who I think was 8, I want to say at this point, La Petite Chevalier, and it's a beautiful little piece with Ari's boyish vocal. It's like a minute and a half. Or a minute 12. It's a beautiful sort of perfect kind of way to end the album side. You've had these 3 very different but very equally intense, deeply musical pieces, deeply lyrical pieces, but all coming from totally different perspectives, and this is like a perfect way to end it. It's a perfect sort of, it's a perfect, and it's just a perfect end. And to this ridiculously high level side of music, and where Nico's range, both as a singer and as a lyricist, is just incredible. Because really, that My Only Child vocal, that is as pure as Nico was ever going to get. And this was not someone who was particularly obsessed with purity, though in that there weirdly was an intense level of artistic and aesthetic purity, which is interesting how all that shakes out, right? So basically a perfect side of music, and kind of an unprecedented side of music, highly creative, masterpiece stuff, and then we flip the record over. If Janitor of Lunacy is Nico's greatest song, I feel like the opener of side 2, Abscheid, is the most one of her most characteristic songs. Abscheid was one of the ones played at the Bataclan show, it was another one that I was very, very struck by. A little bit more, I don't necessarily think that's just because it's sung in German. A little bit more of an obtuse song than Janitor of Lunacy. The lyrics, when translated into English, and by the way, and I think I made this point in the last video about Nico, her lyrics translated into English from another language are just as great. I mean, they read just as well, which is a testament to her greatness. But the Abscheid is another, again, dark, imagistic song. It picks up in the sense where Janitor of Lunacy and the Falconer left off, where it's basically a duet between harmonium and Cale on viola, but again with almighty drone and just, again, that sense of ambience of the room. As I was thinking about it, if the Marble Index is like a stone cathedral, this is maybe like an ancient Lutheran church, not ancient, but an early Lutheran church in Norway or something, like where whereas I think the Marble Index is more marble and stone, maybe limestone. This is far more wood. There's the grain of it, and that's part of what I mean by the ambience. It feels more church, but large, huge, old, several hundred-year-old church, and being maybe up in the choir loft than it does necessarily cathedral or monastery. Monastery, I think, is really the Marble Index. This is like a 400-year-old church alone in the choir loft. But Abscheid is another. I mean, like, all of these songs are great, and Nico was seemingly incapable of writing bad songs. I mean, you would think that the outtakes from the Marble Index would be her starting point. That's part of her strength as a writer. She was so good and so consistent, and then sort of overachieving herself at this point, that no, she just kept writing. So Abscheid, a dramatic, brilliant side opener, another dark, penetrating piece of work, incredible. But then we get into Afraid, and the original demo, You Are Beautiful, taken from the lyric in the song. And You Are Beautiful is a complete left turn, as much of a turn as Le Petit Chevalier is, for instance. It is so it's basically all Cale. If there's a harmonium on it, I don't hear it. Piano and then viola, but this isn't the shrieking, squawking viola. This is viola played like it would be in a classical composition. And this is beautiful. The vocal melody is absolutely gorgeous. And basically, what has Nico done? Nico has written her very own "I'll Be Your Mirror." This is what the Chelsea Girl album could have been, without the sort of tasteful coffee house strings. She is capable of writing. I love her version of Gordon Lightfoot's "I'm Not Saying." I love some of the stuff on These Days. I mean, I love some of the stuff on Chelsea Girl, but my goodness, this is her writing a song on that level of conventional beauty, of conventional melodic beauty. And quite honestly, it's really lovely to hear Nico sing, because I think by this point she was maybe an even better singer, because she was just so powerful. And you hear her on the demos, it's just so overwhelming. And obviously her vocals on this album, it's just like, it just hits you, square between the eyes every single time. So it's really cool to hear Nico at this point singing in a softer, more approachable style, and that her songwriting is as great as anything on that first album, and as great as "I'll Be Your Mirror." I don't think comparisons to All Tomorrow's Parties or Femme Fatale really make sense in that. But "I'll Be Your Mirror," it's as beautiful. It is her softest and most open vocal performance since that. And it is absolutely gorgeous. Now, the lyrics are really interesting, though, because the lyrics could really be open to interpretation, and really it's something of it could be read as a very serious declaration of intent. And it could be read, I can't believe I'm going to phrase it this way, but if you really want to reduce it, it could be read as like a, I hate to phrase it this way, this sounds really dumb, but yeah, a no sellout proposal, declaration of principles. It's really interesting. It's a really, really interesting lyric. Very simple. There's a kind of repetition of lines, but absolutely perfectly written. Plus, that musical setting that Cale does. I mean, this is Cale's sort of duetting with himself. What Cale does is absolutely perfect. That vocal, oh my God, it's just absolutely gorgeous. And I know Nico had sort of fought with beauty and fought with her own beauty. It's a funny thing. There are even moments in here, the moments where she's grabbed by Garrel at the opening. You're so used to seeing Nico sort of in these robes. Actually, it was funny that they had asked her why she hadn't made more movies with Warhol, and she said it was because she wouldn't take her clothes off for him, which is why she didn't make more movies with Warhol, which I thought was an interesting comment. But you're so used to seeing Nico in this sort of all-powerful, removed from time sort of way. And it was interesting because when Garrel grabs her arm, sort of beneath you see how sort of, for lack of a better word, like feminine she is. You all of a sudden get a sense of sort of the shape of her body, and how and how, well, I hate to, soft and actually feminine she is, because she's so imposing and intense, and you're when she talks, you're trying to make sense out of her, and she her singing and her acting in the film whether the earlier scenes where she's crying, or the scene on where she's standing on the jagged rocks next to the waterfall screaming, "We're not supposed to be here," like it, or when she's declaring in German towards the end, or when she's holding the sword in the final shot, or my God, you don't necessarily get a sense of the softer femininity of her. And it's just in these fleeting glimpses, and it's in sort of the fleeting glimpses of the refrain of this song. It's a fascinating, beautiful song, and again, really otherworldly and absolutely gorgeous. And it's just cool to hear her sing in this style, because it's nice to know that she can do that. And again, I talked about the being the author of her own work. This is the author of her own work. A step beyond, in a sense, Marble Index, because she is writing songs on the level of Tim Hardin and Bob Dylan, and you know what I mean, and Jackson Browne, who I'm not the biggest fan of, and Lou Reed, and that these guys, she's right there with them, and in some cases writing more consistently penetrating stuff than some of them. And speaking of that, now I don't want to get too far into this, but I wonder how much, to use the Zappa term, conceptual continuity there is going on here, because the third song on side 1 is My Only Child, and the third song on side 2 is Mutterlein, which, according to Google Translate, is womb. And so I looked up the lyrics. Again, very simple repetition of lyrics, similar to that of Afraid. So it's not the dense outpourings of some of the other songs on side 1 or on the Marble Index. But Mutterlein is seemingly either about motherhood, and either reflecting on herself as a mother or her own mother. And again, what an absolutely fascinating song, kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, psychologically. What an interesting angle, and what interesting subject matter, and the way that she tackles it. She's just so kind of all the way out at the front of the Viking ship here. I mean, or maybe the crow's nest or the choir loft, right? Because there is such a, and that's one other thing, by the way, about My Only Child and Afraid. There is a hymnal-like quality. The sturdiness of the melodies. She was a melodicist, and the melodies are rock solid. And it is hymn-like in part, not just because of the acapella, mostly acapella of My Only Child, but the sturdiness of the melodies, the solid form. The abstractions are more in the concepts, the instrumentation, the approach. But this is very, very sturdy form stuff that's not flimsy. And that's part of why you can evoke all of this stuff out of it, because you've got rock solid songwriting aesthetics, right? It's amazing. So anyway, Mutterlein. I can't say any German word without doing that, basically. It's a bad habit of mine. Abscheid. It's a tick that I just can't get away from. So anyway, Mutterlein is, however, where Kale really goes all in. So not only do we have this, so My Only Child is very beautiful and very emotionally open, and Mutterlein is dark and forbidding and intense, right? So I do wonder how much of that is the light and shade, because what's back? The trumpet's back. What's also back? The choral vocals, though I think this might just all be Nico multi-tracked. And this ties together Janitor of Lunacy, the Falconer, and Abscheid with the almighty drone, except Kale is now, I don't know what the fuck's going on, and I don't know how much of this is Boyd and how much of this is Kale, but this is now abstracted out into an increasing horror movie terror, so it sort of echoes of Evenings of Light, that is basically could have soundtracked Poltergeist or parts of Videodrome or something. I mean, it's stark, it's scary, and it is, again, it really evokes being alone in this church. There's again, this very weird ambience and heavy feel of the wood, heavy feel of the imposing, I don't know, of the walls imposing, or the balustrades coming closer and closer. I don't know. It's very, very intense. It's an incredible production piece, as well as being an incredible vocal from Nico. But it is interesting that the child mother, that there are all of these common links between. I don't know how deliberate that was. I would assume, I mean, we're talking about very, very high level creativity people here, so I would have to assume that is on purpose, and that is not just simply accidental somehow in the sequencing. And then we go back, we're back firmly in the Desertshore, with All That Is My Own, and the production setup of Mutterlein is now full swing with All That Is My Own, with Cale, I believe, playing a bass line that kind of doubles as percussion. It's hard to believe that there aren't drums or percussion on this, because it feels like there is. It feels like this is sort of the first time that Nico has like a full backing band, but it's the most one-man band that Cale gets. And this amazing clanging, clash of sounds, and this you're trying to make your way through through a stuffed Bedouin or Egyptian market, and it's just as a excuse me. Oh, that's the other thing, by the way, I wanted to say about Mutterlein. That fucking ending, because the trumpet, and I think it's just one. I don't know if it's one trumpet player multi-tracking themselves, or if it's multiple trumpets. But that ending, that like distended, clanging ending with the trumpets and the dirge collapse of the end of that song. That, by the way, everything I talked about with the lantern on their Satanic Majesty's request, this is like the next development of that. It's that kind of sound painting taken to an even further, less song-based extreme. It is the development of, I mean, I love that middle of the lantern. That's one of my, I rhapsodized about that in the third Rolling Stones video, but goddamn, this is that end of Mutterlein is like that, then like developed to the next stage. It's just so compelling and just incredible. So anyway, but All That Is My Own, again, Nico writing these great melodies, these beautiful, and this, she wrote this entire album, just to be clear, but these beautiful melodies, and really, again, interesting, introspective, penetrating, fascinating lyrics with sort of Jim Morrison-esque snatches of broken word, kind of incorporating spoken word the way that they had done it with The Soft Parade, which would have been, I guess, the most recent Doors album at the time, and which also then becomes basically proto Patti Smith, especially like some of her stuff on Easter, but especially like Wave. Really, really, really beautiful. Really, again, really creative, because they hadn't utilized her voice like that yet, and so and they put a lot of static on it. It's just it's just such an interesting way to contrast the way of recording her voice and really using her voice, especially in the spectral choral, almost Star Sailor-esque backing of Mutterlein, that they're getting into using her voice more as the instrument. And so All That Is My Own is just such a really interesting, clanging, clanging is the word, but brilliant. And I don't know if that's a French horn or if that's a trumpets yet again, but I think it might be a French horn. Those parts are beautiful. It's sort of avant French horn, like that's amazing. It's just an amazing song, composition, production piece, album closer, and sort of wandering through this market, wondering if you're going to get out of there somehow. And a final word, by the way, on the Inner Scar, which I really liked. The Inner Scar, I thought of a better way of describing it. Imagine if the Holy Mountain sort of combined with Teorema. If the Holy Mountain was stripped out of the voiceover and then the fourth wall break at the end, and it wasn't as visually dense, imagine a minimalist, stark Holy Mountain with like Teorema, a Teorema vibe. Maybe that's a better way of explaining it. So I'm going to link to that. It's super worth it. I cannot recommend it enough. And especially if you have an appetite for that sort of thing. So Nico, so this came out at the end of 1970. Nico did a appeal session, and I'm just going to look that up really quick because I'm forgetting this. I think it's 4 songs, and is it January 71? I forget when she recorded this. You'll just have to forgive me. But the songs are... she did a second Peel session in 1974. So it's February of 1971. No One Is There. Frozen Warnings. Janitor of Lunacy. So, and this is all just her at the harmonium. They're amazing. It's perfect. They're out on YouTube. I can maybe link to the playlist. Like, it's really, really worth hearing. I mean, this is incredible. She is the thing. She is the totality of the music. And what she does, as much as I've talked about her range and her artistic growth and development, there is such a purity to what Nico does that I think, as much as I love the growth and the development, I think that what she does is right in line with, Howlin' Wolf, Motorhead, John Coltrane, where, yeah, there's range. Yes, there is range. But there is such a purity to it that sometimes range doesn't necessarily matter that much, because the thing itself is so potent. And so coming from, like, it just doesn't sound like Nico could warm up. It doesn't sound like she rehearses, because it's just, it just happens. You don't think of John Coltrane sort of warming up. You think of him playing, for 15 hours at a time or whatever. You don't think about Motorhead like rehearsing necessarily. They are Motorhead. They are the thing. It is pure. It is absolute. That's sort of, so anyway, so those 3 songs, those are amazing. But she previews, and I guess we'll get to this next year, one of the standout songs, one of the best songs on her next album, 1974's The End, Secret Side, which is incredible. And though I love the version of Secret Side on The End, that's a very production dense, heavy production. And I think this, just her and the harmonium, I think might be the definitive version, yes. And the power and intensity of her vocal, ho, ho, ho. Because I don't know that Nico was as powerful in 1974 as she was in 1971, maybe. Hard living does things to people. And the 1971 Nico, like, it is unrelenting. So yeah, Secret Side is absolutely phenomenal. So, and then she filmed 2 songs for the BBC show Disco 2, which I will also link to, because it is fascinating to watch this woman play the harmonium and sing. Again, the physicality of Nico. it's really, really interesting to watch. It's really interesting to watch her hands on the harmonium and it does bring humanity to it. It's that thing of, oh my God, this is a human being producing this sound. That is a sound produced by the vocal cords and her lungs, and it is reverberating in her skull, and that is coming out with her breath, and that is a human being doing that. That is a human being that is in control of that seemingly unwieldy and overwhelmingly powerful of an instrument. Jesus Christ Almighty. It is something to behold. It is truly something to behold. And yeah, and I was going to talk about it, like, I don't know, at some point in the reformed era of Throbbing Gristle, I guess towards the end of their reunion, they did some sort of installation piece where there's like a 12-hour version of the Desertshore, and then I guess, I don't know what the deal was with it. Genesis left, or they were disbanding, or they had already disbanded and they went and finished it anyway. And they got like Ann Honey. I don't know how to pronounce that. It used to be Antony, but I don't know what the pronunciation is now. And a bunch of other people are on it. I didn't listen to that version. I listened to the Throbbing Gristle performance of it, and I like Throbbing Gristle. I saw them in the Reformation era. Excuse me. I loved it. I thought I had a great night. It was real good. I have nearly everything they've done. I'm a fan of Throbbing Gristle, but I have to say, listening to that, especially Janitor or Lunacy, no disrespect, I love them. Genesis Peorage is not Nico. God damn. The Throbbing Gristle version, okay. But yeah, Genesis is, like I said, I say this with no disrespect. Genesis is not Nico. No. And cannot do that. Especially when I saw Throbbing Gristle, Genesis appeared extraordinarily frail. Was able to get into it for some of the performances, but I was shocked by how frail. So yeah. So anyway, that about wraps things up here. I hope that you've enjoyed this. Yes, to be clear, Public Image Limited, 1980, 1981 is coming next. Working on it. I'm already working on it, doing all my research, doing all the things I do. It's gonna have to be split out across 2 videos. The 1981 might be a little shorter, but yeah, 1981 will be probably where I get into the actual talking about the Flowers of Romance album. Really looking forward to that. And yeah, the Flowers of Romance might very well, I don't know, I don't want to fully commit to this. It may very well be my single favorite Public Image Limited album. Who knows? Maybe. I don't know. Those are complicated things, right? It changes all the time. So all I know is I love them. So, and damn it, you know what? I love Nico. So anyway, I hope that you have enjoyed this video. I will see you very soon. Well, soon enough. I'm well into the pill video, so it'll be around the corner soon enough. But thank you for watching. I greatly appreciate it. Like and comment and subscribe. We just had our 2-year anniversary, so that's really, really cool. And I thank you for watching, and I will see you all soon enough in the next video. Until then, bye!